Nice to finally meet you, Frank. Thanks for coming out to do this.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
You first came across, I'm not like a huge fight guy. Like, I know a little bit about MMA, and I think I've had a couple fighters on the show before. Well, I'm friends with Mac Danzig, who's been on the show before. Yeah. But I think you really kind of came on my radar when my friend Ryan Holiday's book, Ego's the Enemy, came out, and the whole like plus minus equal theory, which was eloquently described in that book. That got me interested in you and your background. And then I saw you on our friend James Altucher's show, who is the person who connected us. And in an additional sort of cool little small worldism, that same day that you did the podcast with James, right after that, he had Anthony Irvin on, who you took a picture with him, who's a friend of mine who's been on the show as well. And he was super stoked to meet you. I know that. So
yeah, he's cool.
I was in New York a couple months ago and did James's show, and Steven, his producer, was like, you got to meet Frank. You got to meet Frank. So here we are, man. Psyched to talk to you. So let's, I think let's just start at the beginning, man. You have a fascinating background. And I think above and beyond just your pure athletic accomplishments, which are extraordinary, what I'm most interested in is how you overcame all the obstacles that you had to face growing up. And even more than that, perhaps, is how you've kind of channeled what you've learned and the experiences that you've had to benefit other people. So let's
Sure.
unpack it.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, let's see. What I have now is an awareness of kind of what's going on. And what I realized as youth is I had no idea what was going on.
Of course, you don't have any perspective.
Yeah,
at
you're
that
zero,
time.
and you grow up in your environment. And mine was just jacked. I mean, it was completely jacked, unbeknownst to me. So all of my talents and skills were just completely wasted and just erratic. But as soon as I got into this martial arts lifestyle and I started living and kind of developing this way of understanding how to live, then everything changed for me. Then I had a whole life, I had a whole existence, I had real friends, I had real family, I had real community. And before, all that was not really in existence. It was just kind of this fragile thing that semi-existed. So the minute I became successful and the minute I got stable, I thought like, gosh, we need to do something. Like we should try to like flip this and help people. And that's what brought me into teaching of the martial arts and kind of developing that side of my person. And that was like the best thing for me, was just teaching martial arts, like connecting with people through teaching. And because I was so passionate about it, because I was so, in belief of it, that people, they loved it. They followed me, they learned, they were, interested in it. They were compelled by it. And it was a valued study because at the end, both we learned how to kick everyone's butt, and create this amazing fighting system. But we also created this, format for living that's super successful.
Right.
And that's the plus minus equal thing. That's the
right.
structure.
Is that like the core of, like, what is that blueprint?
It's everything that happened to me in my martial arts journey, which is one day I showed up at a martial arts school and I was taught like the basics of discipline and respect and honor. And like those were, as a young man, the stuff you see in movies. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. But you don't really believe it's true until you're bowing to somebody and they're beating you down. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's real stuff. So it's just all of those sequential steps of the stuff that I learned is this way that I call the Warrior's Code, the way I think about things. And that is, it doesn't matter what you approach. It doesn't matter business, life, social. If you enter it with certain principles and ideas about yourself and about the situation, you can do whatever you want with it. You can make it bad, good. You can achieve your mission. You can give it away. You can do whatever you want.
But none of that can exist without understanding discipline and really harnessing willingness, right? Like you have to be willing to do the work, right? And you can't bestow that upon an individual. That has to be a self-generated notion.
That's all from inside. That's all personal. And I call it divination. I call it the moment you go, oh, I'm an idiot, or oh, I'm ready. I'm not. whatever the decision is. For me, it was I was sitting in prison. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm all those things they told me. I thought I was
right. There's an honesty,
Yeah.
like a willingness to
moment.
look in the mirror and really be honest with yourself about where you're at, as opposed to fronting.
Yeah. And in fighting, it's so easy because you get to face it on a daily.
Right. I mean,
And then-
the most, immediate, dose of humility you could possibly have.
Get
right?
immediate feedback daily. You're like, ugh, okay, that's not working. That's bad. That's of not value. And then when you compete, you get the same immediate feedback, both physically and then socially.
Mm-hmm. What's amazing is that you're even sitting here. I mean,
I agree with that.
like you were destined to become a statistic, right? Yeah. And I would imagine there's people even that had the fortuitous occurrence to fall into a martial arts school after having weathered something similar to what you had to go through and still don't make it out, right? So why do you think you were able to first of all be able to hear what was being said to you, to be honest with yourself about where you were at, and then exercise the discipline to get to work and rebuild your life?
I mean, I didn't hear it until the end. Until I was in prison and I was like, okay, I'm doing the math. There's no way out.
Pain.
There's literally no way out. Like, I was like, what about this? So like,
well, you could have been a career criminal. You could have just been in and out of prison.
My first stepdad, Joe, was this Irish dude, and he was like, work it, get it done. And, he taught me, I came from this hippie family of whatever, do it. Don't worry about anything, or live off the government and just kind of chill.
Well, let's go back there. I want to kind of really understand, those early years. So what was it like? What was going on?
Well, my mom had 4 kids by the time she was 19 or 20. And she came from a Jehovah's Witness, community, which was basically her mom had run off with a preacher at some point who was a door-to-door guy. And all of a sudden she went from middle-aged, or middle class, wonderful going to school existence to living in this, Jehovah's Witness culture.
Were you in the Bay Area then? Where was this?
This was in Los Angeles. So I was born in Santa Monica at the UCLA Medical Center. And but then my mom moved up north. And she moved to Redding and Anderson, California, which were like small towns. I'm assuming to get away from the religion and get away from the whole culture. Mm-hmm. And then, so I grew up, what my first memories were in Redding, California, which is like a small rural town in central California. And, we lived in the projects. We were like, just welfare kids.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then, and so, at some point it becomes kind of a bit of a nightmare, right? Like abuse and, getting locked in the closet and all these things that, I read about as I sort of dug into your story. I mean, it sounds like horrific.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know any of this. Mm-hmm. To me, it was, I had a wake up moment when I moved in with our stepdad, Joe. I was like 8 or 9, maybe I was 8. And, I remember him directing me in the closet, get in the closet. I remember the first consciousness coming that he was putting me in the closet. Unbeknownst to me, I found out 30 years later, it was my mom. My mom was, since I was a baby, putting me in the closet. And it was like this thing, you want to act out? It will shut you down. Right. And it was very effective.
And were you the oldest, or where did you fall?
I was the last to youngest. Uh-huh. So I have a younger sister, then I have an older brother, and then I have one older sister. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was last to youngest, and I don't know what the deal was. I think I had a lot of energy. I think because of my athleticism and stuff, I think I had more energy than others.
Right.
So
and she didn't know how to corral that. So like locking you in the closet.
Yeah, she didn't know how to shut it down, so she would put me in the closet.
And then how long after that before you start kind of getting in trouble?
It was about 7 or 8. I think it's because my brain just turned on. Like all of a sudden I was conscious, and I was conscious of these barriers and things that were happening. And I see it happening in my daughter. She's now very conscious. She's 9, and she's like, bing, she understands what's going on.
Online now.
If I started locking her in the closet, she'd be like, yo, Dad, what are you doing? And she'd be insane. So it was right about this time that I started I couldn't control myself emotionally. It was like 7 or 8, 8.5. And I would just fall apart. I would go to do things like athletically or socially, and I would just have these, social breakdowns, emotional breakdowns. So I was seeing all these shrinks and therapists and like outside people to help me. And I nobody knew what was wrong. I didn't know what was wrong because I didn't know that being locked in a closet was not normal.
Right. So when they're saying what's going on at home, you're like, it's
I'm like,
fine.
what are you talking about?
It's normal. Yeah.
We're in the closet on Thursday.
And did the shrinks come in because of school or?
Yeah,
like,
because I'd have these breakdowns at school, and I was excelling. Like I'd be getting straight A's, but then to be some confrontation or some physical moment that I couldn't physical deal with, and I'd freak out. Right. And so they would send me
fights that early.
Fights, yeah. People picked on me because I was a victim of abuse. Like if you picked on me, I would freak out. Because I didn't want to be abused.
So that button's just getting pushed, and you're just reacting. Yeah.
And I was very young, so I didn't know. I just knew that when it was time to defend, you just went all right. You went all in.
But that's interesting. You were a good student, though. Nonetheless, you were able to like
silly, smart. Yeah, I read all the books. I went home. I was like a super nerd. I went home. I read all the books. I would show up in class. I knew everything. I was like, I was the kid disrupting the class because I had nothing to do at home. There was no TV. There was no social interaction. So I went home. I read the whole book.
Right. Yeah. So when do you get into scruffs with the law?
That was about 9. About 9, I started getting in. Yeah. I started
what, like shoplifting or like what were you doing?
Yeah, I would shoplift. I would shoplift alcohol. I would, I would go into a store and drink alcohol in the back. Like I would steal things. Stealing.
Do you think, like looking back on that now, was that some form of a cry for help, like an unconscious desire to like?
Yeah, and I think a pushback on the stuff. It wasn't. Like it wasn't normal. It didn't feel good. I didn't feel good. I felt good stealing things.
Right.
Like I felt good about that. Like I was totally fine.
You know
what I mean?
No moral dilemma over that.
I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I got this stuff, and then I'd get in trouble and be like, but that's so wrong. Because I really felt okay. Like it felt okay.
Yeah.
That's how messed up things were for me.
I mean, in the household, so you're getting locked in the closet. I mean, was there some physical abuse, sexual, like what was it? What was the
just an overabundance of emotions and people freaking out, and you get hit. You'd kneel in the hallway for hours. Joe had us kneel in the hallway. We'd kneel on your knee and put your nose on the wall for 4 hours in the hallway.
Yeah,
and then the world
that's a different kind of discipline.
Yeah, and the world would go on around you, and you'd just be kneeling in the hallway. And like if you sat down on your heels, you'd get screamed at. So it was like a whole. And he was, the poor guy went to Vietnam as a young man, fought his heart out and came back, and everyone hated him. And he turned to alcohol. Yeah, you don't demons.
You don't treat your family that way.
Yeah, I was kneeling in the hallway when I was like 9 years old, thinking about my punishments, and and coming from a family before that was without a father, without leadership, and my mom was like, "Do whatever you want. We're hippies, have fun." It just completely, made me, push back. I was.
Did your mom survive that? Like, how is she around now?
Yeah. Mom's still alive. She's in East Texas, and she's chilling.
So, all right. So you're shoplifting, you're stealing booze and stuff like that. It's at some point though, like Juvenile Hall kind of enters the picture, right? Yeah.
Well, I eventually stolen some weed from my neighbor's pouch on his 10-speed because I knew that he was selling but the younger brother told me, and we ended up getting arrested at the pond or park or something. But I got 11 days at what was that? Yeah, I got 11 days at Juvenile Hall. And that was the first time that I got taken away from my family. And that was the first time where I was like, talk to other kids about, what was going on. Because these were all the bad kids.
Right.
So I was like, bad kids.
Right.
How we doing? And I was checking in and giving them, here's what's happening. And they were like, are you kidding me?
Like, I read somewhere.
Yeah, they were like, what are you talking about?
You don't get locked in a closet?
I'm like, you're not living in the backyard in a tarp? And they're like, what are you talking about? And it was the first time where I was like, I had no idea that wasn't happening to other kids.
Right.
And that they weren't,
it's just your normal.
That was my normal.
And is that when you kind of got the speech about, hey, listen, if you keep getting into trouble, you're going to have to live here all the time? And you thought, well, that doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah. It was, and I'll never forget it. They were like, listen, if you continue to do this, we'll take you from your home. And I was like,
that sounds
thank
good.
you. Like, wow, what do I need to do? And then they followed up with, if you continue to do stuff exactly like this. I was like, this is amazing. I know exactly what to do. I was 11 11 years old.
Yeah, I think they now call that the school to prison pipeline. Or
Yeah,
something like that,
I was like,
right?
whee!
Like you were on the turbocharged ride right into
So
the heart
terrible.
of that.
Yeah.
So how long do you how much time do you end up spending throughout your youth in juvie?
I went in and out. So I went from the crisis center to foster care to youth home to group home, and then to work camp, and then to youth prison was kind of my journey.
Right. And so how old were you at that point?
So I was 13 when I got to youth camp, which was one step before youth prison.
Right. And so, paint me the picture. Like, what's a day in the life in that experience all about?
It just, I was a young kid. I had no idea what was going on. And they would just move me from place to place. And I'd meet new families, and they were nice. Like, they were, at that time, it was a religious-based community that was kind of supporting that side of social services. So it was Christian Science, and it was Mormons. It was all these wonderful families. And I'd show up and just train wreck them. I felt so bad in hindsight. But I was just traumatized. So I try to fit in. I try to figure it out. I try to, integrate. And then something would happen, and I'd freak out emotionally, and I'd break. I'd escape. I'd steal something. I'd steal a car. I'd steal the van. I'd take everybody in the group home.
Right.
Like, I would do something just completely jacked to make sure that they would come get me and move me to the next place. And then each time it would
escalate.
Increase in security, and increase in lack of resources or lock up resources. And each time it would be closer to what I realized would be prison.
Yeah.
Eventually.
And were you getting like any kind of psychiatric or psychological help along the way? Because clearly, like, this pattern is emerging and you need help. Like, you need somebody to talk to, and they're just kind of shuffling you about, right? Hoping for the best when they're not actually, nobody's actually confronting like what's making you behave that way.
There was no resources for that.
Yeah.
And that was thrown back on the families, that were providing that support, to kind of be families.
Right. So, all right. So, playing it forward, then what, how does this play out? Like, you're in this cycle of like increasingly, worse and worse situations in terms of your behavior. Yeah. But like, where are you at 18 years old, and, what's going on at that point?
Well, when I was 16 and a half, my son was born. And then within 6 to 8 months, I was in prison, jail, and sort of going on to the kind of youth prison thing.
What'd you do that time?
Oh man, I was stealing stuff. I was just a wreck of wreck of a human being.
Stupid bullshit.
Yeah, and it was just about being a wreck of a human being. Like, it wasn't about anything. Like, it wasn't making money. It was just being, as bad as I could be for whatever reason. And so I was 17. I got arrested for stealing a bunch of stuff. And then I went to youth jail, and then they put me in jail afterwards. And then basically they're like, listen, you're 17, you're an emancipated minor, you're married because you're an emancipated minor, and you're going to be tried as an adult. So all this from moving forward is going to be adult time, adult actions, and adult commitments. And I thought they were like the same old stuff. I was like, yeah, whatever, go on the game.
So it wasn't
Here we
like,
go.
oh, shit just got real. Like,
No,
it
wasn't real until I was in prison for about a year. And I did all this stuff and wrote all the things, told all the stories. And I was like, wait a minute. They're serious. Like, I'm not going to get out for, another 2.5 years.
So what prompted you to start kind of journaling and getting real with yourself?
It was my son's birth. It was him being born. I'd never had a father. Like, I just never had anybody there. And then Joe came along, but it was weird and adversarial, and I wasn't like connected to the fatherness. And it wasn't until I was in my, when I was 13 to 15 that I had a dad. Bob Shamrock came along, and I was like, I got this father figure. So when my son was born, I was like, this is my only chance to influence his life and be a dad. Like, this is it. And I'm in prison. And I was like, that's like all this stuff that just happened to me. And I go, dude, I have to change that.
You're just going to repeat that.
That was it. I go, hey, what am I doing? I'm like, I'm my dad. And I was like, So I opened up the notebook, and I was like, no. I go, how do I change it? And first it was, how do I get out of it? Because that was what I was taught. And that didn't work. So then it was, how do I take responsibility and figure it out and move forward?
It's interesting that you decided to just start writing. Like, where do you think that impulse came? Like, just there was nothing else to do, or like this is the only thing that you actually have control over is to start.
I think it was my first voice. I think it was my first communications that were real. Because I was writing down what was real. In the beginning, it was just all the horrible stuff that was happening. What am I going to do? And then it was, how do I get out of these things? And then it was, real plans. And then it was legal writs. How do I get out of this, with the law? And how do I use the rest of it? But I also, once I sat there for a year and I was like, I'm not getting out. Like nothing I can do, say, because before I could show up, I could dazzle them. I'd be, listen, I was locked in closets. You don't understand how terrible it's been. And they'd be like, wow, that's really terrible. We should help you. And after about, 4 years of that, people were like, no, you've stolen everything, you're not, what you say you are. Mm-hmm. So it became my responsibility to say, to be what I said I was. Mm-hmm. And so whatever I wrote down, I was like, I'm going to be that dude. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to be honest. Like I'm going to tell the thing.
Yeah. I mean, but there had to be there was an impulse inside of you that was telling you like, I'm not this guy. I don't need to continue down this path. I mean, I think for a lot of people, probably, I would imagine most people, that system just breaks them down. And then they're just, I'm a piece of shit and this is what my life's going to be like. And they just sort of, wave the white flag and just take it, but there was something inside of you that had a vision for a different life.
Yeah. And part of it was I would see my friends come and they're the same friends that were at the beginning of the cycle. And we'd all be in prison together. I'd be like, whoa. It's like, it's happening to him too. Mm. I was like, it's right there and I could see it. And it became the example of like, this is what you're not supposed to do this.
Right.
You'll be so done. And then, I had somebody. I had Bob Shamrock.
Yeah, you had Bob. So you had met Bob earlier, right?
Yeah. And when I was 13 or 12, almost 13, I went to his group home.
Uh-huh. And so he was taking kids in and he was training people to be fighters. And
not necessarily. He was just training to be athletes.
Yeah.
But he did have that ritual of if you had beef with somebody, you dealt with it. Mm-hmm. And that was in the swimming pool.
Right. In the pool?
Yeah, you literally put the gloves on and everybody stood in a circle and then you went at it and then you guys hugged it out. And the only rule was that when it was over, you hugged it out and it was over.
Uh-huh. So when you were there, when you were 13, how many kids were there at that point?
20, 21, 22.
That's kind of amazing that he was taking
all boys
kids in. Like what? Yeah. I mean, what compelled him to begin doing that?
He was. Those were his kids. He couldn't have kids. Him and his wife tried, and he was deeply religious, and he grew up in L.A. His dad had a textile mill and business and was very successful, and they. He saw downtown, and the homelessness, and he always wanted to help that community. So when we couldn't have kids, he was like, these are going to be my kids. I'm going to start a home. I'm going to help the kids. Mm-hmm. And originally they were just going to be, the kids. They weren't going to adopt them. They weren't going to, make them family.
Right.
But, when his marriage fell apart and his wife left, that became his family. We became his family.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you have that experience. And then
it was crazy. Like we were a giant family in a huge van. Uh-huh. Like it was the craziest thing, you could imagine. We were like the Wild Boys. Uh-huh. But it was all with the goodness. Like, we would clean up the parks. Like we would play the football team. We would play the cops. He believed like through athletics and through like family and like, accomplishment, like you could, really do anything. Like you could build anything.
So when you finish with prison, how do you end up back with him? Like, did he come and get you? Or?
He never left. So he always advised me and he always visited and wrote me and sent me, money and encouragement and, kept track and, and he also advised me. He was the one who was like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, what do I got? The only thing I got is this body. I've built up this body and I've done this thing and, because he really believed in athletics and bodybuilding, and he always guided me on that path. So I spent those 3.5 years in prison, super nerding out on bodybuilding and lifting weights. So by the time I got out, like I was 220, a solid, all natural,
how
prison
much
food.
like yard time insane. Did you have? Like, could you just work out all day, or like how?
You get by law, because I'm a super nerd. By law, you get an hour a day if you're beneath maximum security. So I got an hour a day minimum. But I would get 3 and 4 hours a day. Plus, I would always work in the kitchen, so I made sure I could have the calories to support what I was doing. And I was working out, hour and a half, 2 hours a day, 6 days a week.
So like an hour in the yard, but then back in your cell also, push-ups and that kind of thing? Or
I didn't do a lot of extra like calisthenic stuff at that time until I got into my minimum security stuff. And I was running like a fire crew and like a whole other team. In the beginning, I just lifted weights, because I was also in level 4. I mean, Charles Manson was like 1 yard over. When I first went down, I was like 18 years old. I got to Corcoran, and they're like, yeah, Charlie's over there. I was like, what are you talking about? But I just lifted heavy until, for 3 years. And then I got to minimum security, and then I kind of changed my whole structure. But what I would do was I would stretch. I would always stretch and try to keep myself limber, because I was packing on muscle. It just went, right. It was crazy. Because all you do is sleep and read and lift weights and walk around the yard and flex your muscles. Like, there's nothing to do.
And I would imagine there's a lot of energy going into, alliances just to survive, right?
Yeah.
Like who you hanging out with, who's watching your back, whose back are you watching, like all that. I mean, look, my only frame of reference is what I see in movies and on television or other people that I've had on the podcast. But that's got to take a psychic toll.
Yeah, it's pretty real. And I grew up alone, obviously, with and without family. So, and then when I first went to jail, like I didn't know that I was brown. Do you know what I mean? Like everybody around me, my wife, my mom, everybody was white. So I thought I was kind of white. And then when I first went to jail, they were like, listen, man, you can't just be hanging out with white people. Like, what's your race? And I go, well, everyone around me is white. And I'm like, you're brown. So in the beginning, they were like, you're Mexican. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't really we're not like Mexican. Right. So when I went to prison, I was encouraged to hang out with the Mexicans. And I was like, I'm not Mexican. So I went and hung out with the Indians, with others, because they're of a culture that's just, whatever you are, you are. If you're Hawaiian, you're Polynesian, you're Indian, you're in that group. And that, I think, made it a little bit easier and a little bit more challenging for me when I was doing time, because I was easily attacked in that group because there's not a lot of power and there's not a lot of strength in that group.
I can't imagine, man. I mean, it's just so crazy that you got through that, and then ultimately end up with Bob, and you come out 220. What, you were jacked up?
I was probably 218. 218. I'm 5'10". Just all natural, just huger than huge. And when I got out, Bob picked me up, and he basically gave me this super dad chi pep talk. He's like, listen, you've screwed up your life, but he's like, you've just made this huge commitment. And he lined off all these things that I did when I was in prison. He's like, you got educated, you went to college, you lifted weights. He's
right,
like,
you went to college in prison.
I went to college in prison. Like, I had all these things, and he's like, and you could fix sheet metal and cars, and because I was like a super nerd, I was locked up. I was like, I'll take everything, I'll do anything to get out of here, because I didn't realize I was screwing up until I screwed everything up, and then I was stuck, and then I was like, oh hell no, and I was going to get out. But he's like, listen, you could be an athlete, like you could be a performer, you could do this, and by the time my brother had just had a successful career as a stripper.
Right.
So he's literally,
this is Ken, right?
This is Ken, yeah. So he's like, you could be a stripper like your brother. He's like, he made a ton of money, and he tells me the whole story, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, or your brother's also doing this wrestling thing now, and it's totally taken off, and he kind of breaks it down to me, and it makes it sound like it's sport, wrestling, grappling, fighting.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. So I get out, I have 2 days out, and then the second day he drops me off at the dojo, and he's like, what are you going to do? And I go, I'm going to be a fighter. I'm not going to be a stripper. I can't. That's ridiculous.
And just for clarity,
other than good strippers. But I was like,
well, you could have some short-term cash,
Yeah, I had this huge long hair. So, I mean, I could see where he was coming from.
Like the Chippendales
thing.
Yeah,
I could see where the money was coming from. But I was like,
can't do that.
I can't do that. It's just not me.
And Ken, so just for clarity, Ken is Bob's adopted son, who then becomes your adoptive brother because
and first teacher.
Bob adopts you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then first teacher and trainer.
Right.
For fighting.
And it seems like this all happens pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right. So you go to the dojo, and was it immediately like, this is my home?
No, it took me a long time to get adjusted to it because I just come from prison. So I had this very closed, I was living in books and this special world and working out all day and flexing on the yard and living this other existence that's very sub world. And then when I got into the fighting thing, it's a whole other sub world where there's no time to do anything else. Like you just focus everything on the thing, and then you're always tired and exhausted. So I just tried to show up, like and like not die. And I think people appreciated that, and then I think people were turned off by it because I looked like a tough guy, but I didn't know anything. So they would just beat me up, and I was a waste of space when I first started. Because I looked like I had value, but I had zero.
You're walking around like you got all the answers right. But it's not like you were a wrestler in high school.
No, I did nothing.
You didn't have any of that kind. You were just.
I never
big.
made more than like 2 days of wrestling camp, and I'd get thrown out because I'd get in some fight or something terrible would happen, or some emotional breakdown or something ridiculous. So yeah, I never made a sport longer than a week.
And so, what kept you in? Was it just this is the only thing I got going?
Yeah. That was it.
It's this or nothing.
That was it. That's all I had. And I thought, okay, wait, I could get out and I could use these sheet metal, certifications that I got, or I could go do this thing that I got, but I'll never have that thing. Like I'll never.
Right.
And my dream was to be a world champion. My dream, there was a few moments in my life where I remember complete clarity and those divinations where I was like, this is what I'm going to be when I become who I want to be. And that was watching boxing at the foot of my stepdad's bed and watching him fight and win and then, be a champion and then deliver a moment, and have everyone be focused on that moment. And I just remember that. And I was like, I'm going to be that guy.
So you held that vision, even though you're getting your ass kicked.
Yeah. And even when I was in prison, even all through this journey of
before that, even
of living in the streets, like eating out of trash, all this stuff, I was like, you don't understand. Someday. And it was deep. Like there was no efforts towards it until I got out of prison.
So what do you make of that? I mean, where does that come from? I mean, I think a lot of people would just be like, this is my life and it sucks.
But I think if you never give up on that thing, then it's totally worthwhile.
But to even have the idea to begin with.
But everybody has the idea.
Right?
Everyone has the idea.
You think so?
Yeah. I ask my daughter in the mornings, what do you dream about? And she tells me. And they're the same dreams. She wants to be next to Zendaya, dancing and singing and hitting the movements on Disney Channel. Because in her world, that's where she got inspired. So it's like, all she wants from me is to create that.
Right, but
she
has your support. She has you saying, "Well, let's make this happen."
Totally.
Right. Whereas you have the world beaten down on you.
Yeah, but I also developed and got into this system, and martial arts was the first one.
Right.
Martial arts was the family.
So when you hit that dojo, are you thinking, "Well, even though you're getting your butt kicked, I'm going to make a career out of this. I'm going to find a way to make money." Or you must have thought, I can go do this and learn. I'm getting my ass kicked. I got to make some cash. Maybe I should do the sheet metal thing on the side, or at least get something else going on.
I honestly thought it's all there was because I also knew who's going to hire me. I'm going to have 24 felonies. It's ridiculous. I have no real qualifications for anything other than teaching people to beat people up and helping inspire people.
But the thing is, there's something so powerful about just being all in. You're just there is no other route. There's no plan B. This is what I'm doing. Even though I'm just learning and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm getting my ass kicked. I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what the beauty of the whole system is and how it works. It's like when you show up. It's like when I show up and I humble myself to a mentor, who sometimes has been I've been a fan of, or they've been a fan of me, or like there's all kinds of roles that we play. Mm-hmm. But to show up to a plus and to be like, listen, man, I'll clean your floors, dude. Like, show me the thing, and I'll be over here. I'll serve you.
Right. You have to have that humility.
Yeah.
Right. Did you learn that humility through fighting or through just life experience?
I learned it through the fighting.
Yeah.
Because I learned everything on the example, everything on the real, as I call it. Right. So it's like, how do you figure out what's bad? Do all the bad stuff and they'll send you to prison. You'll guarantee, I can tell you exactly what's bad and we'll end you up in prison. And then conversely, I can tell you exactly what's good. But it's only through the experience of doing. But here's the thing. Once you have people that have done the experience, you don't really have to go on the journey. You can find somebody who went on the journey and be like, hey, buddy.
What's funny is that you're like this bookish, nerdy kid who's like academically inclined and is reading all these books. Like you could have learned these lessons, on the written page, but you had to have it. You had to experience it for yourself.
Yeah. But I think it's because my social and family situation was so dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So,
of course,
when reality's backwards, then you do the backwards, right?
Yeah.
So
it's almost like there was a vacuum of free will, like you were headed in that direction until something intervened. So, all right. So you're learning. You're in the dojo. You're training your butt off. So where does the first fight come up? Like you hit the ground running. It seems. Just the way it reads online, it's sort of like this just kind of happened overnight.
It did. Partly because. It took me like 2 weeks to heal up from the tryout because the tryout's like insane. You do 500 squats, sit-ups, push-ups, and leg lifts, and then you spar a professional fighter for 20 minutes. And mine was Ken because he's like, well, he's my brother. I'm going to do him right, honor, chi. And he just beat the hell out of me. And it took me a couple of weeks to recover. And in that time, I just, I accepted what I was going to do to the max of what I understood. So during those 2 weeks, I changed my mind. And I went, okay, I'm jacked up, but I'm going to become a professional fighter, and this is my chance. So I'm going to go all in. And as soon as I healed up, I just started training and taking notes. And I took the same mindset that I had in prison, which was I was needing to overcome this thing. I was stuck. It was trapped because I didn't have, and this was the path. And I followed the path. I showed up every day. I studied. I was, I created theories and ideas and concepts, and I asked questions, and they beat me up because I asked questions, and because there was a culture before that where you didn't ask questions.
Right.
You followed the rhythm and the flow and the thing and the curriculum, and so I was, unbeknownst to me, against the system a little bit and a bit abrasive.
A bit abrasive. What, asking too many questions?
I was a nerd. Yeah, I'm like, but what about this? They're like, beat them up some more. I'm like, oh, no.
Right.
But I didn't learn because, normally, if you want someone to stop asking questions, you beat them up a few times and they stop asking questions. But for me, I was so used to getting beat up because I didn't know anything. And it was all part of the journey that I was just like, I'll fully accept that. It's like getting a spanking when you like doing something when you know you're going to get a spanking as a kid. I would do that because I knew like I'm going to get the answer or part of it and then a beating. And I'm like, that's all right. I'm totally worth that.
Yeah. And you're like, I know how to do the beating part.
I can survive. Yeah. Like I'm super strong.
But kind of what I infer between the lines with this is like this deep sense of personal responsibility. Like, yeah, you have Bob and now you have Ken and you've got this community at the dojo. But this understanding, like the only person who's going to be able to solve this dilemma of life that I'm in is me. And the only way out of this situation to a better life is through. And I have to rely on myself and my own, my brain and my body and my mind and my spirit. And within that, like this idea of just doubling down, like going all in completely and resting all the responsibility for that path on yourself. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the only way. And I think you'll find uber successful people in sports and everything else have the same mindset, drive, persona, whatever you want to call it. Mine was from a place of desperation and survival and all the other stuff. But many of my other friends, it comes from a place of competitiveness and, self-achievement and community achievement. So
on the competitive aspect of it, do you see yourself as somebody who is competing, or at least at that time, like competing against others to be better than other people? Or was it more of an internal thing, like competing against yourself to be the best version of you?
It was both for me, because I was also leading the sport, or trying to lead the sport. So, everyone was eventually studying me. And it was also based on survival. So like I had to win. I always had to win.
Right.
Because I was also going with the notion of like, I'm going to fight to the death. So therefore I have to win, because, I'll exhaust all remedies. So I had this, always super intensity about my competition. And then, I'm sure that came from internally, because all I ever wanted was that thing. Do you know what I mean? And imagine having it right there. And all you got to do is beat somebody up, or all you got to do is work really hard, or all you got to do is, really truly apply yourself. And for whatever reason, God, the world, Bob, it was all laid out in front of me, and I just had to achieve it, go down the journey.
So how long before, from the first moment that you walk into the dojo to your first competitive fight?
8 months.
8 months? And what happened in that fight?
I won. I beat Boss Rudin in 10 minutes by decision. Technically, and it was just instantly I went from nobody to superstar.
Suddenly,
like
everybody's
rock star.
talking about you. That's so crazy. I mean, how did you get such a prestige fight right out of the gate? Like, didn't you have to? It would seem like you'd have to work your way up to a fight like that.
Well, Pancrase was a fairly new organization. It kind of gone through the first cycle of stars, so they were looking for a new kind of generation of stars. And we just all happened to come along in this new tournament that was made to build the next wave of stars. And Boss was like my counterpart. Ken, I was Ken's brother in the U.S., and he was Boss Rudin.
And he had beaten Ken, right? So it was sort of pinned as a grudge match kind of thing?
He hadn't beaten Ken yet. They hadn't matched up yet, I don't think. But he'd knocked out a ton of people, and he was very dangerous. I didn't know who he was. I came out of nowhere. I'm like a young nerd from prison. Every time I asked somebody, I'm fighting Boss Rudin, they're all like, oh, and they would look down at the ground. I'd be like, this is just terrible.
Yeah, but there's something great about that naivete, like when you don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can go into it with like a purity.
In hindsight, it's horrifying because...
Yeah, but had you known, had you been able to fully appreciate the situation you were in, the fear might have gotten the best of you.
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, it's horrifying because I just wrestled this past New Year's in Japan and like this kind of crazy grappling match. And I saw that generation that I was, 20 years old, no idea what's going on, the fear and all that stuff going on. I was like, I can't believe I did all that. Like, I can't believe I went through that and came out like, halfway okay. Like, that's insane.
So speaking of Japan, when do you end up going to Japan? Was it after that fight or before?
Well, that fight was in Japan.
Oh, it was in Japan.
And then my next, I think 16 fights were in Japan.
But you lived there for a while though, right?
Yeah. Well, I went there. So after 6 months of training, I moved to Japan. And then I finished my training in the Japanese dojo.
Right.
And training.
And what was the style of fighting that you were learning there?
Pancrase, or what they would call submission fighting, submission grappling style.
And was that different than what was going on in the States? Like, why did you go to Japan?
That's where the money was. And that's where the developed leagues were. We were on a 20-city tour. And then that's where the contacts were. That's where the opportunity was. In the States, it was still like UFC was just about started or just had started. And it was a tiny audience that was doing good numbers on pay-per-view, but it was nowhere near the revenues that were coming in Japan.
At that point, yeah. And what did you learn kind of about being immersed in that culture that helped you as a fighter or as a human?
I actually learned a lot because... if you position that against, I just came from prison. Like, I was been sitting in prison for 3.5 years. And before that, I was a complete criminal, like living on the streets and just doing everything horrible you could ever imagine. So it was this weird moment where I went from the fear and quietness of prison and the focus to this other fear and quietness in Japan. because I'd never left the country. Like I'd never done anything like this in my life. And all of a sudden I'm on parole going to live in Japan and finish my martial arts.
Did you have to clear that with your parole officer? How'd they let you go to Japan?
This is the greatest letter writing of my life. Like I had to prove that it only exists in Japan. It's an emerging sport. The revenue, like there was all this, preparation and stuff. My skills, after prison were put to good use. But yeah, I went to Japan on parole and finished my career of training. And it was a crazy wake up because no one spoke English. So every day it was the same quietness that was in prison, but it had this whole other intensity because I was going to fight this guy. I knew I was going to fight the guy. The minute I landed, like, you're going to fight the guy. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was all leading to this moment. So it was a very intense, 2.5 months where everything was just every single day. I was like, oh my God, it's coming. And then I'd be like, who are you fighting? And I'd be like, Boss Root. And they'd be like, oh, and they'd look down and I'd be like, this is the whole, like, I'm so scared. And then luckily Funaki and Suzuki, the older teachers of the dojo, basically Ken's role for us in the States, they took me under their wing and they showed me the basic stuff. And, they basically saved my life as I see it because I was not prepared to fight Boss Root when I landed in Japan. He was going to kick my face off.
Right. But you somehow you beat this guy. I don't know how you did that, but you do. And you're launched into, immediately into mainstream awareness as this new talent. Right. And as I understand it, you were kind of looked at as somebody who could excel in all the various disciplines of mixed martial arts, right? Like, I'm a triathlete. Like, my analogy to that would be, in the sort of earlier days of triathlon, there'd be the guy who was an amazing runner in college, and then he didn't really know how to ride a bike or swim, but he was doing really well because he's really good at one of those three things. But today, as the sport has matured, you have to be amazing at all three of them, or you're out, right? And so when I was reading about you, I was thinking, well, you were kind of like one of the first guys who could excel across the board in all the many different kinds of styles of fighting and disciplines that are required to excel in MMA. Is that
totally? Yeah, I was the first complete athlete because that's where the study took me. The need was to create a system, a la Bruce Lee, where you did the most amount of damage with the least amount of effort to yourself, and you could win under the skill set, under the rules. So the rules were ever evolving, as was the athlete in the sport. I was the first super athlete that could fight. I only say could fight because I had more techniques than the other super athletes. And then I was the first guy to put a whole system together where I was good at punch, kick, wrestle, knee, position. 11 of my last 11 fights all finished differently because it doesn't matter where you're from or what position you're in. Everything has equal damage opportunity if you have the right system.
And the system that you put together, was this something that you crafted yourself, as part of the hey, I have a new idea or a different idea, or is this something you learned from the Japanese?
Pure survival. It was an amalgamation of everything that happened. So as the sport continued to evolve, in the last 7 or 8 years of my career, I was focused solely on striking because the 5 years before, the sport was focused solely on grappling. So all the focus turned somewhere else. So I turned my attention elsewhere to develop my skill elsewhere.
Right.
But it was about staying ahead of the sport and staying ahead of the development and the popularity curves in the sport. And in trying to stay ahead, I just put together a complete system because I kept facing everybody and their skill would be somewhere else and then it would be somewhere else. And at the end of, I'd say 15 years, I had a complete fighting system that would, stand up to any system, any martial art, any adjusted martial art.
Right. So grappling, striking on the mat, no matter what it is, you're able to manage it. Right.
Yeah.
And at that time, was it true that most of the fighters they would be good at one of these things, but you always knew what their weakness was?
Yeah.
Right? And you could kind of exploit that to your benefit.
Yeah. Because in the beginning it was singular martial arts. It was, I'm a karate guy or I'm a wrestler. And I'm going to use that skill set as a base, to gain control.
Right.
And I would just study. I didn't know any better. To me, I didn't know what you weren't not supposed to do or what your system was supposed to have. I had no rules. So I was just surviving. Right? So every other system's like, don't go to your back. I'm like, why? Go to your back. I'm on my back. If it's easier to move, I'm going to go there. So I just rewrote and wrote my own system. And I used all the strengths of the other martial arts that were around me and that oftentimes were being tested against me. So a lot of these martial arts skills that I learned were, I'm going to fight so-and-so, they're really good at this. I'm like, well, let's study that. What does that mean? And then we'd figure out new stuff around that, and we'd add that to the system.
Yeah, interesting.
And I'd go out and kick their butt and defeat them, and then be like, well, it works.
Right.
We'd keep it in the system.
Right. And within that is kind of an appreciation for really trying to figure out what your own personal weaknesses are, right? And focusing on developing them as opposed to, well, I'm a striker, I'm a grappler, so I'm going to double down on that because that's what I know how to do. But instead to say, well, here's where I can develop where I'm weak that would make me this super athlete and be able to perform in all the various, capacities that I need to go to the top.
Yeah, that's the harder journey.
Yeah.
The facing all the weaknesses.
Well, no one wants to work on their weaknesses.
Hey, let's show up and all work on our weaknesses today. Yeah. But that's the real stuff. That's what they really do.
Right.
And I would just have guys who'd be like, before we knew, I'd just be like, listen, put me in the wall, put these gloves on, punch me in the head. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I got to figure this out. Nobody's got a theory. I was like, so punch me in the head a few times and I'm going to work this out. And they'd be like, you're insane. I'd be like, but somebody's got to figure this out.
So rather than finding the coach who knows how to do that, you're just going to, figure it out on your own.
Well, I also figured out nobody knew. Because once I started my journey and I started teaching and I started sharing and I started giving, because I thought that was the natural process. To learn more, you give more. I started realizing people didn't know.
Right.
And I started people would bow up and interrupt and, change the information. I'd be like, wait a minute. How do I get out of the wall when someone's punching me in the head? That's all I need to know.
Right.
But they would be distracted by other things because what I realized, and it was really weird, is I was just on a journey to survive and it was changing martial arts at the same time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of resistance in all sports and all martial arts about the whole thing because no one knew what was going on, and it was so new and different.
Right. It was so different back then to what it is now. So when you look at the sport today, and you see these guys, the money aspect aside and the media aspect aside, what's different about the guys that are fighting right now? What's different about Conor McGregor versus what was going on when you were competing?
No.
Nothing.
Zero.
Yeah.
The
but these guys have to, in order to win now, they all have to be super athletes, right?
No. Here's the beauty of fighting. And I think it holds true in some other sports. Everything works when you're a super athlete. Everything works. You hit somebody and you're like 190 pounds and you hit them flush, you're going to smash them. So as you become a super athlete, it's really easy to rely on things that work, to go down these other paths, to stop developing yourself, to stop on these journeys of exploration that really make you, invincible or undefeatable or a master or an expert in your field. That's the hardest part. I want to go do what's best and easy and fun. I want to knock people out. But the truth is I suck at some things. And those are all the stuff that is should be the study, should be the focus of the whole moment. Because when you get there and you're not ready, then you're going to freak out and lose energy and focus. And, then the machine, everything falls apart.
Right. But ultimately that's what you have to do to grow. Right.
Yeah,
if you want to continue to grow, you got to focus on that stuff.
As a human being, we don't want to. We want to take the fat pill. We want to take the easy. People don't want to get pushed in a wall and punched in the head to figure out something. That's way too much. Yeah. Someone just give me the answer for God's sake.
Punch in the head. I'm done. I'm out of here. You're like, I haven't been punched in the head since 7th grade. So, all right. So you go on to be you go on this crazy winning streak, fighter of the decade. You fight from 94 to 2010, right?
Yeah.
Essentially undefeated. You have there was a couple times where you didn't.
I went 10 years undefeated.
10 years undefeated, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, you retire in 2010 after, was it Nate Diaz or Nick Diaz? Nick at the end there.
Put a good whooping on me.
But he's sort of the next generation coming up, right?
Yeah.
And then you had one fight a year ago, right?
Well, the grappling match. I did grappling, yeah.
Why did you come back and do that?
It was totally like left field. You know, when I was 16, I had my right leg went numb, started dragging behind me. And I went to the doctor and they said, listen, you got a spondylolisthesis in your L3. So you need spinal surgery. And I was in a group home at the time. So I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And my group home doctor, dad, took me to a chiropractor. And he's like, listen, it's a common injury, but you're going to have to care for it the rest of your life. Like, you got to keep the muscle built and you got to do these goofy exercises. So he gives me these goofy exercises. So I do them for 30 years and then it stops working. And I have the worst back pain you could ever imagine. And I'm considering surgery and I'm like Mr. Natural. Like, I'm not into anything cutting my body open. So, you know, I'm going down this deep path of surgery. And finally I consult with one of my friends and he's like, you got to see my friend Dennis. He's like a magic man. And I go and see him in like an hour, he fixes my back.
Whoa.
And he's like, what's wrong with you? And I go, what's wrong with me? I'm like, and I ask him all about it. And he's like, listen, you're putting too much energy into it. He's like, you just need new exercise. Your body's changed. Everything's changed. And he's like, let me restructure you. Let me give you these new exercises and send you on your way. And within 2 weeks, I'm like climbing mountains and playing in kickball tournaments and all the stuff that I wanted to be doing, but I was in too much pain to be doing, you know, for like 3 or 4 years, I'm doing. And I'm like, this is amazing. And so I'm putting out in the universe, like, I want to do stuff with my body. And phone rings. It's Japanese promotion. Right. They're like, is there any way you could wrestle Sakuraba, who's my oldest nemesis, like for 18 years, you know, at this date? And I'm like, maybe. Like, I tell him the story. I'm like, I just fixed my back. And I'm like, I'm so fired up about it. And I go, let me go to the gym and try it out. And I go in and 3 days later, I call him back and I go, I could probably do this. I go, we're going to have to modify the rules a little bit because it's not good, but I think I could do this. And then I went and did it.
So you went and did it. It was a draw, right?
It was a draw, yeah. Yeah, 10 minutes draw.
Yeah. That's cool, though. So you were 45 at the time?
45,
45, right.
Yeah.
So you're 47 now? 40.
Oh, I think I'm still 45.
You're still 45?
I'm at 46.
46.
I'm 46.
All right. Well, this is super interesting to me because I have spondy also.
Yeah.
And
it hurts, right?
The pain is not that bad. I was first diagnosed with it maybe in 2010 or something like that. And I'm 51 right now, but I was in the midst of like training really hard. And I was like, I didn't have any pain at the time. And I was like, and it was a chiropractor who diagnosed it. And I would go to him and I still go to him and I get traction and, you know, he adjusts me and things like that. But then this year, 51 is like the first year where I've started to really feel my mortality in a way that I haven't. I have some pain on the left side, like sciatic nerve pain, and a little bit of numbness on the top of my left foot. And I'm looking for some new and different things to do. So I'm really interested in what Dennis had you do.
Yeah, go see Dennis.
Yeah. Is he out here?
Yeah, he's in Beverly Hills.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
So tell me what. Yeah, hook me up with it. Tell me what some of the things he was instructing you to do.
Well, he said one of my core things is just, as you know, instability. You know, there's it's not connected, so it's not all structured, so it's over fatiguing all the time. So when I went in, I was pretty essed out. Like my back had gone out bad. I think I was had all these appearances lined up, and I couldn't get off the ground. It was the first time my daughter had seen me like that.
Yeah.
So I was like, nah. So, and he's basically like, listen, you know, you've built all these muscles to support you with the crooked thing. And it's like, we got to release all that stuff, kind of restructure you, rebalance you. And then he's like, let me show you, you know, he's like, you just got to get that tiny, tiny muscle on top of your, you know, right on top of your hip. He's like, you just got to get to that muscle. And he's like, let me show you how to do it.
So is it like a lot of psoas type stretching to lengthen out the?
Well, for me, it's about keeping my hips square and strong. So I do basic, you know, warrior poses and postures and, you know, lunge stances and stuff like that to keep everything aligned. But literally for me, I just need to keep that little tiny muscle that sits above your hip bone in the back.
Right.
I just need to keep that strong because it's not because of the misconnection.
Right.
So if I keep that strong, everything else feels great. If I skip 3 days, I literally feel like my back's going to go out and I feel like I'm going to lose a thing here and it's going to pinch and my right leg's going to go numb.
Yeah. So you have no numbness now?
No, I got nothing now.
That's great.
But if I miss, like I laid on the couch for 2 days because I was so tired from the yard work, and it instantly today, pain, and I got tingles in my my leg. But what I'll do is he showed me the exercise to unlock it to help release the pressure on it. And so like I'll get on a table, I'll get in like a sprinter stance, and I'll like try to pull my heel back and release my hip, like get it to stretch out. And that will take the pressure off and kind of release it. If I have it go out and I get like this, I'm like, we're jacked, team.
Right. Yeah, you're all like lopsided.
Oh,
and I think, for me, just running for so many years. And
running is a tough one because of the impact.
And you develop certain muscles and others atrophy, and you get that imbalance. And then with the spondy, you start favoring one side over the other, and then that leads to running injuries. There's a whole cascading effect.
He spent an hour releasing the rest of my body tension, which was 2 other guys with a couple of machines and some other weird stuff. And I thought at one point I was going to tear my knee out and I was going to crap on myself. But every 3 minutes he'd be like, stand up. Let me look at you. All right, get back down. Let's adjust this side. Because every time he'd figure out where the tension's left until there was no tension left. And he's like, okay, you're straight. You got no more tension. And he's like, now keep that area strong. And you're straight. You're cool.
Right. So how long did you have to kind of do this protocol before the pain alleviated?
Instant.
Oh, really? Oh,
Instant.
Wow.
No, it was, you don't understand. I was laid out, like trying to explain to my daughter, no, I'm going to be okay. She'd never seen me like that. So it's been 9 years, or at least 5 years that she's never seen any of this.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, right? No, I'm crawling around the house. Don't touch me, like jacked. So it was just a big wake-up call. I was like, what am I doing? Like, either I'm going to get this fixed or I'm going to figure out an alternative.
Yeah.
And he just happened to have the alternative. So yeah, you 100% got to go see him.
Cool. So you feel good now?
Yeah.
You think you'll do another fight?
No. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed the competitive side, but I didn't enjoy the training. And then it was last minute. I was like the fill-in last minute guy. So there was just, it wasn't the experience that I wanted. Although it was the experience that I wanted.
What did you want? What did you think that you wanted?
I just wanted enough time. Like I wanted to really train. Like I wanted, 4 weeks. Like I wanted a real training session because I'm old. I don't train. I hike slowly and I do yoga and I dance at galas. Like training is very minimal now.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about now. You're doing all kinds of things now, but probably is the main thing that you're doing kind of mentoring and coaching other people, not just in MMA, but kind of like life coaching, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't actually have any people in MMA except for if you are one MMA company owner. But it's mainly business stuff.
Right.
I at the last phase of my career, that would have been the Strikeforce era, which would have been the last 5 years, so 2005 to 2010. I became a league owner, and I was the broadcaster, I was the consultant, I was really ahead of the Strikeforce brand, and I was also like the main event guy. So what I did to kind of get the tools to do that, because it's ridiculous. Like I was trying to lead this whole league against the UFC and get on network television. Is I took a mentor, and he was 35 years into product development and asset management and mechanics in Silicon Valley. So he's like, a product's a product. And he really taught me how to look at products and businesses and IPs and lifespans. And he just taught me about business. I didn't know about business. I went to college in prison. I learned the basics.
The University of Leavenworth.
I didn't get a solid one. So this was another level of education. And, by that time I had a brand worth, like $5 million or something. And I was just entering into a phase of, huge opportunity. And that was ownership in the league and these other roles and stuff. And so I just, in the midst of training and doing all the stuff I was doing, I was like, well, I got to learn this stuff too. And I went down that journey. And for 3.5 years, I took an education on how to asset management, project development, product development. And then at the same time, I was running a professional fighting team.
Right.
And it's all just become now one unit except for nobody's fighting each other professionally.
Uh-huh.
We're all just business professionals.
So what's going on with Strikeforce now?
We sold it to the UFC.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we made a super nice exit, and yeah.
All right, so now you've taken this acumen that you developed as a result of that experience. It's that's the plus and the plus minus equal, right? Like working with that guy in Silicon Valley who taught you all of these things. And so what is when you take somebody on to mentor them in the capacity that you do, like what does that look like? Like walk me through that experience.
Well, everyone's at a different place normally, but most people are obviously looking for something, some change, some moment, some divination. Usually they're coming in search of something. The hardest part is finding out what they want or what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. So although they'll tell you, hey, here's what I want to do.
Or I would imagine they're stuck often, right?
Yeah, usually
plateaued somewhere.
Usually you're stuck and you're like, what do I do? And you don't know how to change or transform or make that movement. So usually I get them in some role or get them there. And then I sit down with them. I figure out what their roles and goals are. Like, what do they really want to do? Because we all talk about stuff and we're all doing stuff, but do we really want to do it? Like, is it really what we want to be doing? And then once I can figure out what they really want to do, then I can kind of help guide them and pull out of them what that dream is, I guess, what that thing is, what they really, really, truly want to do, what their purpose or what they believe their purpose is.
And what do you think it is about your unique experience that makes like your tutelage, your counsel a little bit different than what somebody might get from, I don't know, Tony Robbins or somebody else who kind of is in that space?
I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. I can feel what people tell me what they need. Mm-hmm. And then for some reason, I can help visualize and create systems to capture that. And yeah, people trust me, I think, because of my honesty, both in my story and, I live, this is my life. Like, this is what I do.
Right.
I think Tony Robbins and I share that. Like, I think he came from a place of, wow, we got to help some people. Like, this is important. We shouldn't let people do or live like this or experience this because it sucks.
But most people either don't know what they want or think they know what they want, but it's not really what they want.
But here's the thing. People really, truly know what they want if they sit down and think about it.
Yeah.
And we don't sit down and think about it.
Well, because we're scared. We're scared.
We're scared.
But because we're scared, we're living reflexively. Yes. And the devil we know is better than the devil we don't.
Yes.
And we're taught to, and we're raised to seek comfort and luxury and security. And these things are impediments to the things that we really want in life, and also the things that truly will make us happy, because it's not about those other things.
Yeah.
So the process of getting somebody to that place requires them to be, well, I think it goes back to trust. Like, they have to trust you. They have to feel comfortable with you. And you have to create that space that allows them to be vulnerable so that they can tell you what those fears are. Right. I mean,
yeah,
that seems to be the only way to kind of at least address it so that you can move beyond it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some reason, I see it because when I read my story, I'm like, what on earth?
Yeah.
Like, this is the most ridiculous stuff that you can imagine. But I have all those experiences, every single one, including people are like, well, how do you know about business? I was like, well, my first business experiences, I would get hired to sit at the end of a table at a multi-billion-dollar negotiations by billionaires. Uh-huh. So at some point they could be like, yeah, I got Frank Shamrock right here to champ.
Right. University of Leavenworth.
That was it. Like, nothing else, just to name me and to show that I was there. But I was sitting there as a young man going, all right, well, this is how business is done. This is intriguing. And learning about business. Uh-huh. And that was, how I now understand, well, wait a minute. This is what business is about, and this is how it's done. And, these are a lot of the principles that are followed at the highest level of business.
Right. Your story is about pain and determination and self-responsibility. These are things that a lot of people, there aren't that many people who have had to confront the kind of obstacles and pain that you had to. And I think most people really just aren't that disciplined, right? They didn't go to a dojo in Japan. They didn't have the hard knock experience that you had growing up, and they also didn't have the kind of structure that you were lucky enough to find yourself in later. So how do you convey to these people the lessons that you learned in a way that they can hear it and then implement it?
Well, I believe everyone can.
Yeah.
The only thing I did was change my mind. Mm-hmm. Like, that's it. I went, wow, I can't do this. Like, I screwed up.
Yeah.
Like, I just changed what I truly believed about myself. I went, wow, I am a criminal and a liar and a scumbag. Like, all that stuff they wrote, I'm truly that person. And I'm going to change it. Like, that was it. Mm-hmm. And I think most people don't ever sit down and write that down. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of good things and I've done a lot of bad things. But it's like, I think when you face them and you move through them, I think when you're prepared to address them, I call it the secret life. Everybody has, the life they live out here, and then everyone has the life they live inside.
Right.
And when you
and that life
that
that life that they live inside is often marked by fears we talked about, but also shame. It's inside because they're afraid if they ever told anyone about that they would lose all their friends and all that sort of thing. So I know in my own life experience, like, you have to own that, and you have to, in order to move past it, you have to shed a light on it, and that involves talking to someone like yourself or confiding in another as a process of dismantling it so that you can grow and transcend it.
Yeah, and even just addressing it. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people, it's writing it down and going, wow.
Yeah.
Double underline. Wow.
Yeah. I'm a long time in recovery, and they call that in 12-step the inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to take an inventory.
Brain, even for the brain, like, if you try to learn something, there's a million ways to learn. But the minute you write it down, the minute your brain connects with the mechanics of creating and writing, it is so imprinted, and it has so much value to your brain. And that's why writing, we talked about writing. It's like when you can write, when you can document, when you can note, when you can theorize, it's like that's the stuff where your brain's going and growing and changing. And that's the stuff you want to support, right? You know how hard it is to sit down and write, I'm a loser, I'm a criminal, I'm the worst father ever, like, I'm just like my dad, I'm really am those people. Like, that's really hard. Mm-hmm. And then to make a change to that, like, but why not? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, why not?
Well, I think there's the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, and there's the facts of our experience. But some people become overly connected to these stories. Like, they get attached to, well, I'm a lousy dad, and I'm a this, and I'm a that. And it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, right? It may be the truth, but it also becomes a pretty accurate predictor of future behavior. So I think the trick is, once you're writing it down and you're honest with yourself about that, how do you interrupt that cycle? Right?
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. That's where your community comes in, and your pluses and your minuses. And
well, let's talk about the plus minus. We've been talking about the plus minus equal thing, but we didn't actually describe exactly what it is.
Yeah, we kind of have. It to me, it's how I live my life. It's the system that I function on. And for anything I want to accomplish, I find that plus. Someone who's done it, someone who's accomplished it, someone who's successful at it, someone who's happy doing it, whatever it is. And I present myself to them, I make myself humble. I try to learn from them. And sometimes they say no. And then I find my equal, my competitor, my neighbor, my friend, my whatever, the person I want to equal my business to, or equal my presentation to, or my thing to, and I find out what they're doing, and I befriend them, or I embattle them, or I I somehow become aware of them. And then I find a minus. I find somebody to teach, somebody to guide, somebody to take my pluses information, my equals information, and empower them with. And I just work that system on everything I do, from marriage to business to, make a film, start a PSA. I'm doing a PSA. I don't know how to do a PSA, but I called up a guy who's done 500 PSAs. I'm like, buddy, here's what I need.
What are you doing a PSA on?
On mental health awareness. But
what inspired you to do that?
One of my clients in my talent management business is bipolar. He's one of my best friends. And And I met him in broadcasting, and he's just one of the best broadcasters in the business. But he's bipolar. You know, he's up, he's down, he's crazy, he's locked up, he's not. He's, you know, we're looking for medication. So it's been, you know, a 10-year journey with him. And I just met him, and, you know, no one was caring for him. I was like, well, dude, we can't leave this guy behind. We got to bring him with us. And, you know, he's been super successful. But, you know, part of his journey is becoming a social activist and communicating, you know, what he's doing and how he's doing it, you know. Right. So I've seen him. I mean, he's manic. Like, well,
if anybody who's had any experience with somebody with bipolar, I mean, it's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, it's tough.
There's a lot of, you know, education that needs to be done, not just for those who suffer, but for, you know, everybody out there to kind of understand what that condition is all about, because we demonize it in a way that I don't think is fair.
No, and it's challenging because in other cultures it's celebrated. You know, in other cultures it's at least recognized as being different. Mm-hmm. You know, to me they're just different. He's just different. My buddy's different. Yeah. He's amazing, but he's different. You know, and it's like we got to do different things for him. But with those different things and with, you know, some nice lifestyle adjustments, I mean, he's extraordinary. Mm-hmm. He's killing it. Mm-hmm. You know, part of our PSA campaign is we have this stigma around mental health. And people are like, they turn their back. You know, they don't turn and go, well, what do you mean? Yeah. You know, and hey, I've got those calls at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. and you know what I mean? Like,
who is this guy? You know, like,
I've got those crazy calls, but you know, at the same time, he's just different. And if he had another disease or another illness, we wouldn't think twice about it. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd be there supporting him at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd be getting his medicine at 5 a.m. Yeah. But because he's a little quirky, we're like, you know, goofball.
You seem like such a sweet guy. I have such a hard time picturing you beating the hell out of people.
Oh, and that, so like, this is the most challenging part. You're going to love this. So I had the hardest time hurting people. Uh-huh. Like it really, truly weighed on me. And I couldn't understand where it came from. So actually my first professional fight, you know, no rules fight, I lost it. Because I couldn't put the hammer down. I couldn't break the leg. I couldn't break the arm. You know, I couldn't kill him. Like I was like, this is not, you know, this is not in my soul. You know, even though that was my dream. Yeah. So I had to leave that thing, losing that, and sit down with myself again and go, wait a minute. I picked up a sword. I'm swinging it in battle, and I'm not going to, you know, down anybody and they're going to down me. Yeah. I'm like, this is the craziest thing in the world. And what I realized, I was just traumatized, you know, the experience of abuse and all the stuff and the fear. Like, I was just traumatized by the violence and I hadn't accepted what it truly was. And I hadn't accepted that was my real role. I was going to hurt people. Mm-hmm. That was my job. And once I did, I was like, well, you know, this is really messed up, but yeah, I have to hurt people. That's my job. Yeah. And then I got really good at it. And a lot of people got messed up.
Well, I mean, yeah, but now it doesn't seem like it's your nature though, you know? And like I said at the outset, I'm friends with Mac Danzig and I have the same thing with him. I'm like, he's such a nice guy. Like, and then I watch him fight and I'm like, who is that guy? You know, like I was like, whoa, that's what he does. Like I can't even imagine, you know? And I think that's something that's something I would imagine is kind of across the board with the best fighters. Like they're working out their angst and their frustration and their aggression and all of that in the training and in the fighting. And when they're walking around in their life, they're cool, you know? And it's the guy with the, you know, tap out t-shirt and the half pulled low who's like, thinks he's all that, you know, who's like aggressive. T-shirt. I'm like, no, the real fighters aren't like that. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. They get their fill. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they don't need to.
Cool. Well, we got to wrap this up here in a minute, but I thought it would be cool to kind of leave people with some insight, perhaps a little inspiration or some tools for somebody who is in that place of fear or living reflexively and is not happy and perhaps can't see their way out to the next thing or is disconnected from what it is that they really want to do or the person that they really want to be. And as somebody who has overcome so much and is living such a huge life in so many different ways now, what kind of, what would you impart to that person?
I would start with looking inside and writing it down. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people.
Do you still do that, by the way?
Every day.
So what's your tactical process?
I start every day when I wake and I come to consciousness. I instantly begin my prayers. Mm-hmm. And I thank God for waking me up once again and the day. And then I go into anything I think is important to talk to God about in the universe. And then I meditate and I visualize what I want my day to look like. Mm-hmm. And that's before I get out of bed every single day.
Yeah.
And then that's how I start.
You seem like you're really good at visualization.
Yeah. I can see the stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's because what I put in my brain is the stuff and nothing else. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where people go astray, is they put all this other crap in their brain, when if they really truly want something, that's the only thing that should be in their brain. Mm-hmm. That's all you really need. Yeah. That's what'll make you happy. That's your dream.
I don't think we're selective enough with what we allow through that sieve, especially with our mobile devices. We're polluting ourselves with a lot of content, but not a lot of intentionality about what that is and what it's actually doing to us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yeah, it wears out your spirit and your soul. But if you want to change it, all you got to do is turn that stuff off and get in yourself and take some time and meditate. And the best meditation is when you can add something physical to it. We can create some martial, rowing, swimming, something where you're really connected. And if you can add the earth or the universe, like if you can add something of substance to it, like it just gets, better and better. But it's in those moments, where you're in your brain and you're really pushing and you're in other settings that you go, oh yeah, that's right. These are my dreams. Yeah. And then write those down and then find the people, find the community, and tell them.
Do somebody. The plus minus equal.
Yeah, and tell somebody. Here's what most people are afraid to do is to tell somebody. I'll tell you all my dreams because I'm actively pursuing them and crushing them. And if I don't, we're going to celebrate in the loss or the change or the whatever. Most people never go, here's my dream, because they're afraid it's not going to come true.
Right. Well, once they do that, then they're on the hook.
And then they own it.
And then they can't back out.
Yeah. But I say it, own it, write it, start it, get your plus minus equal, live by honor, respect, and discipline, be a good person. And all of this stuff will happen for you because people will like you. They'll be pleased with you. They'll be pleased to be around you and to help you.
I'm with you, Frank Shamrock. I would add one thing to that, though, which is patience.
Yeah, got to be patient.
Meditation and journaling have been instrumental in my own life, and I began journaling. I was using the artist way, like right when I got out of rehab in 1998, and I continue to do it to this day. And I remember doing morning pages, journaling every single day for a long time, just confused. But it was a way of expressing that confusion. And I think it was necessary to get to a place of eventual clarity. But patience is super important. And I think particularly important in our, quick fix, life hack culture where everybody wants to snap their fingers and make it happen overnight. So patience. And I think, if you're an example of anything, it's that, we all are capable of so much more than we allow ourselves to believe. And if you're willing to do the work and be patient and show up and give all of yourself to something, whatever it is, that amazing things can happen. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, cool, man. Great to talk to you.
Same here.
Awesome. So if you want to connect with Frank, the best place to do that? I mean, you got a website, Twitter, all that, Frank Shamrock.
Yeah, I am at Frank Shamrock everywhere. And if you have an ask, you can send it to askfrank@frankshamrock.com.
Cool.
And I'll try to fill your ask. If I can't, then I'll let you know I can.
Yeah, and pick up his book, Uncaged,
which
I still have to read. I haven't read it yet.
You're going to love it. Honestly, book nerd. I read I read 1,000 biographies. So when I wrote one, I was like, no, I'm going to write the real deal.
Yeah.
Like no fluff, no, like I'm going to write what really truly happened. So that
most sports biographies suck.
they suck. And they're
Because
all like,
they're trying to
hang out with
advance
these guys.
the brand of somebody who's in the twilight of their career.
And I hang out with them like, no, dude, this didn't happen. So I wrote it and I was like, okay. I remember reading all those books as a young man and thinking, that's what it's like. And I went, I want to write a book so that they know that's what it's like. For real.
Yeah.
So that's what I wrote. I wrote a book for that kid, or the young man who, was on a journey. So hopefully you like it.
We're all on a journey.
I know, right? And hopefully it just continues on and on. That's the blessing.
Cool.
That's the blessing.
Well, great talking to you. Thanks, man.
Thanks, bud.
Peace.